This is DJJohnny at JDMFM, and today I'm back at Banky continuing my history of this whole area. Jeepers, I think this is about the fourth video in the series. I've come all the way around the Mersey through a footpath which goes through the PQ Corporation buildings, through there, public footpath coming through, and I'm actually on my exercise today as part of the lockdown of the COVID and the coronavirus issues. But nonetheless, that's where I am. I've walked through the factory there, and this area just behind me is what they used to be called Pottery Wharf. Now that was on old maps from years and years ago, and Pottery Wharf, you can see the area along there. That's the area where I've come from. The pink eye is just further round the river, around there where I did one of my early videos. This video is all about the iron foundry, which is literally just over there. It was called Bank Quay Iron Foundry, or Taylor and Sanderson Foundry. That's what the story's going to be about, and we're going to try and find out what amazing engineering feats this company got involved with. You can't see it now because all the buildings have gone, and it's now become PQ Corporation and also Unilever. The iron foundry was owned by Charles Taylor and George Sanderson, and they actually owned a bigger foundry, which is actually at Le-Willows, or was at Le-Willows, called the Vulcan Works. All gone now also, but there's a massive history associated with that, and maybe another video another day. But the Vulcan Works was at Le-Willows, and this is another Vulcan Works of the same company and the same people who run it. And they were called the Vulcan Works because that's the name for the god of fire. And boy oh boy was there some fire here. Heat and smoke and dirt and everything else belching out of the smoky chimneys which were just behind me. Jeepers creepers, no wonder it was called the Vulcan Works. Let's go and find out what happened. And this is Banky in Warrington in 1844. It's an old map, and you can see Pottery Row up there, which and of course the pottery warehouses, which was the potter's factory. The factory was actually owned by J&F Bolton, opened in 1792 but closed in 1812. Pottery Wharf, which is the same area there, is also Colonel Patton's Wharf, which we did in a previous video, where he made copper and transported it all over the world. Just below the workshops there, the area for the pottery, is Bank Quay Foundry, which we're talking about today. This amazing Vulcan foundry at Bank Quay in Warrington. And this is Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was the guy who actually was responsible for setting up the business in the first place, the Vulcan Foundry at Le-Willows, and then later at Bank Quay. He was born in 1785 in Shropshire, near Market Drayton. He came from a wealthy family, but moved to Liverpool after marrying his wife, Jane Hill, who was the daughter of a Liverpool merchant. Charles Taylor was a businessman who became fascinated in the new railways that were sweeping the nation in those early Victorian days. He was actually involved in the development of the Manchester to Liverpool Railway, which opened in 1830, and built his factory in Le-Willows next door to the railway line so he could help to manufacture locos and other railway equipment for this fantastic new era. Now, Charles Taylor had very, very close links with the famous railway and civil engineer Robert Stephenson, who is in this picture behind me, who along with his father George Stephenson designed and built one of the first commercial railway locomotives, you remember the Rocket, plus many other steam locos during the Industrial Revolution. Charles Taylor set up the first Vulcan Works at Le-Willows near Warrington in 1832 to help support Robert Stephenson with the manufacture of locomotives and other railway equipment. And this is a typical iron foundry for the 19th century. You can see the hot, molten metal being poured into moulds to form all sorts of shapes for engineering components of those early days. The Bank Quay Vulcan Works was set up by Edward Taylor, who's one of the sons of Charles Taylor and George Sanderson in 1847. It was on the same site as an earlier foundry as well. This Bank Quay Foundry was initially set up to manufacture large guns and cannons for the military, including shells and shot, but they also made heavy iron castings. The foundry was extended later on to make all sorts of large ocean-going iron ships, including paddle steamers and sailing clippers, which actually we're going to talk about shortly. And this is actually a picture of the Banky Vulcan Ironworks. The men in the picture are casting a very remarkable piece of equipment. The equipment is going to be used in the construction of two very, very special bridges. One over the River Conway, the Conway Bridge, and the other one over the Menai Straits, the Britannia Bridge, going all the way from Wales to Anglesey. Two monstrous hydraulic rams or jacks will be needed to build each of the railway bridges. And in this picture behind me, you can see the process of boring out the cylinder for this huge machine. When the whole assembly was complete, it weighed something like 60 tonnes. Blinking heck! With the growth of railways in Victorian times, Robert Stephenson was charged with building the Chester to Holyhead railway line, and this would enable passengers to get all the way from London to Holyhead and then onto a ferry across to Ireland more easily. However, before the railways could be built, two huge bridges had to be constructed. This one behind me at Conway, the Conway Bridge, and also the Britannia Bridge over the treacherous Menai Straits. The bridges were very, very special. They were box girder tubular bridges. The trains actually went through the middle of these box girders. You can see the big box girders on there, and the trains went right the way through them, through those tunnels. The smaller Conway Bridge was built first, and then later the enormous Britannia Bridge. Absolutely unbelievable structures, and this is what Bank Quay Foundry got involved in building. And this is the Britannia Bridge as it would have looked in 1850 when it was first built. You can see the enormous twin box section girders, which are similar to the Conway Bridge, where the trains used to steam right the way through the middle. These huge 1,500 tonne wrought iron tubular sections, which are something like 460 feet long each, were built on a nearby beach, then floated out on pontoons under massive towers, and then raised something like 130 feet into the air using these hydraulic jacks. The whole length of the bridge was something like 1,512 feet. Absolutely enormous. And this remarkable picture is of the Britannia Bridge when it was being constructed. You can see one of the box section girders has already been lifted in position, and it's been lifted using that piece of equipment there. That is the hydraulic ram or jack that was made at Bank Quay Foundry. There's another one on the other side, and using chains it was pulled up inch by inch by inch all the way up to the top. There was a steam engine at the top, and that steam engine drove a water pump which pumped high pressure water into the jack. It was such an amazing feat of engineering and never been done before. And this is a fantastic picture. I love it because this is a picture of the completed assembly, which weighed about 60 tonnes altogether. The cylinder which we saw being manufactured before is there, that cylinder there, and it's about 6 foot long. That is the actual cylinder itself, as you saw, but the rest of it was also manufactured at Bank Quay. And how do I know it was manufactured at Bank Quay? Well, if you look very, very carefully there, it says Bank Quay Foundry, Warrington, 1849. Amazing! And just to show how much people thought about the assembly that was built at the Bank Quay Foundry, they were invited along to the Crystal Palace in London for the very, very first 1851 Great Exhibition, where all sorts of manufacturers and people came from all over the world to have a look and to exhibit their products. It was the brainchild of Prince Albert himself who set the whole thing up in the first place. A fantastic exhibition of glass in this Crystal Palace. The funny thing is that when they had to transport the assembly, this huge, monstrous ram assembly, down to London from Warrington, Bank Quay, they had to go on train, of course. And what happened was that the train had to stop at every station because the bearings were so hot. So it had to cool down for a quarter of an hour at each station before it could make its slow way all the way down to the Great Exhibition. Let's have a look at what it looked like inside. And here we are in the exhibition hall. This is where our fantastic assembly, our hydraulic jack or ram was presented, and there it is. You can see it there in all its glory. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that ram was made at Bank Quay and was actually used to build those fantastic bridges, the Conway Bridge and the Britannia Bridge. And in fact, the sections that they used, the box section girders, was the very first type of bridge in the world. And since then, they've used the box sections in many, many other types of bridge. Just a fantastic achievement, and Warrington was involved in it. Absolutely amazing. And after just a couple of years after the Crystal Palace exhibition, RMS Taylor was built. It was named after Charles Taylor, the founder of the factory, and they made it at the Bank Quay Iron Foundry. So RMS Taylor was actually built at this foundry here, at the Vulcan Foundry. And when it was built, it was a huge, huge wrought iron ship. It was one of the biggest iron clippers which had ever been built around the Warrington area, certainly so far down the Mersey. They do bigger ships, of course, around the Liverpool area, but here in Warrington inland, this was the biggest ship that had ever been built after many, many years of shipbuilding in this town. RMS Taylor was a full-rigged vessel. It was 1,972 tonnes, absolutely huge. It was 230 foot long and 40 foot wide with huge, huge sails. It could carry 486 passengers and about 71 crew. So RMS Taylor was designed to take passengers on the high seas across to Australia as part of the gold rush, so they could go and make their fortune. And it was chartered by the White Star Line, which, funnily enough, is the same line that chartered the Titanic. RMS Taylor was launched here on the 4th of October 1853. There'd be hundreds and hundreds of people on both banks of the river, all the way over there and all the way over here, watching this spectacle. The river used to be a lot wider. That's, you can see there's lots of mud there now, but it used to be significantly wider. And it'd go in on its side here, splash, straight into the water. And then from here, it would then travel all the way up towards Liverpool to get fitted out and ready for its maiden voyage to Australia. So in January 1854, RMS Taylor set off from Liverpool en route to Australia on its maiden voyage, packed with people. Sadly, within 48 hours of it setting off, it crashed into rocks in Dublin Bay, just off the coast of Ireland. 290 people lost their lives. Terrible, terrible disaster. And they found out the reason was because it was an iron-hulled ship and the captain, sadly, hadn't set the compass correctly because of the iron material in it. And that's the reason why it sank in the first place. No doubt find some lessons to be learned from there, but nonetheless, a very, very sad occurrence. And it wasn't long after that this factory that was here, the Iron Foundry, closed down for good. How sad. So that's the story of the Banky Vulcan Iron Foundry. Jeepers creepers, what a story. Those fantastic engineering component parts that they made to help industry in the Industrial Revolution. Jeepers. Where they built those huge jacks, those huge hydraulic jacks, which could be used to lift the tubular frames, the tubular steelwork onto the Conway and also the Britannia Bridge in Wales. We also saw how they won an award and they were able to go to the Great Exhibition of 1851 and how they got the huge press down there to that beautiful, beautiful building. And then finally we saw how they built RMS Taylor after the Charles Taylor, the guy who started the business in the first place, and how they built it here, one of the biggest iron clippers that's ever been built in these areas. And then it sank on its maiden voyage on the way to Australia, and how it became Warrington's Titanic. Jeepers creepers. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little tale of Banky, and there's going to be more tales further around the bank as we go on. But meanwhile, this is DJ Johnny at JDMFM, and whatever you're doing, hope you have a fun time, and see you again very soon. Bye.